And I couldn't believe it as I'm driving by. I couldn't believe my eyes. Here was a man in sweats, in like running clothes, but he was walking backwards, and not just like cautiously. He actually had a rhythm of walking backwards, and he was moving pretty quickly. It sort of stunned me because I'm looking at this guy, and he's making all the motions, but they're going reverse. And it was almost like watching a movie, and they're going backwards, and you get to watch everything go in reverse. And he's walking backwards, but then there's a guy jogging. And the guy jogging, he had to see him, and he's coming down, and this guy's coming backwards, right? He's in a real motion coming backwards, and this guy's coming forward, and they are literally on the same path to connect and to bump into each other. And I passed by. I never saw what happened. I never got a chance to see whether the guy walking backwards ran into the guy who was jogging forwards. But as I was coming here and I was thinking today, a lot of what we've heard over the last couple of weeks about Jesus and his parables and the stories that he tells are really meant to ask all of us to be walking backwards, to think in an opposite way, in an opposite direction than everyone else. And yes, there will be times when you are on a collision course with other people because they are not walking, they are running forward. They are running at full pace, coming down, and you could see that as the man and the other man running were going to collide, that the values, the ideals, the teachings of Jesus, the love that we are meant to have, is going to collide, very probably, with the rest of society, because society is moving at such a pace. The problem, I think, for you and I is slowing down enough from running ourselves to actually give consideration to how is it that we are going to be walking backwards in our everyday life. What are the things we are going to choose to be, to act like, to say, that are going to be in direct contradiction to the direction and the pace that everyone else is going? But for you and I, if we're honest, most of the time, if there are people walking or running in one direction, we will simply join the crowd to run and jog alongside. And indeed, for most of us, we end up very competitive about who's in front of us and who's behind us, and we forget all about the fact that we are meant to be countercultural, counter-society thought. We're supposed to be acting in a way that Jesus acted, and if you notice, Jesus' words and actions got him into a ton of trouble and a ton of problems. I made a huge mistake on Friday. We went down on Friday to see the Capuchin Poor Clare nuns in Wilmington, and after we were with them and we spent time with them, we try to go down a couple of times a year to say hi and hang out and to have a meal together. And afterwards, we go to a hotel that's there in Wilmington, and we're going to stay overnight because we had to get up at like 5:30 in the morning. We left by 6:30. It's a 3.5, 4-hour ride to Wilmington. By the time you eat, by the time you hang out with the sisters, you're famished. It's all over. So, we made arrangements to stay in a hotel. So as we were walking into the hotel, we have a very small bag. There's 3 of us. Arthur came along. There's 3 of us, and all of our stuff is in this little bag. It's not much, and to tell you the truth, we just forced Arthur to carry it, so he had it over his back walking in. And there's a girl at the desk, and I'm sure there's other people staffing this place. It couldn't have been just her there. And as we're there, and I'm checking in, and you give them your name and your credit card and your ID because, they don't know who you are, and you don't know who you are, so you give them your ID. And then all of a sudden, you end up in a situation where there's this woman who comes in, and I saw her car outside. I could see that there was someone she was helping get out of the car, and I did not know at that time that the man was in a wheelchair. And so she comes inside and she says to the girl, is there anyone here who can help me because I have a handicapped person that needs to come in and I have a bag? And the woman was rather very curt and dry, and she said no. It wasn't an explanation of no. It wasn't like, I'm really sorry, I can't leave, I have to be here. There was no explanation. It was just, no, we don't have anyone. And I found that I got angry, and when Donna said to me, is it all right if I go help her? I said no to Donna, but I wasn't really saying no to Donna. I was more annoyed about the woman behind the counter who could have said any number of things, but at that point, I guess I felt as though it was the responsibility of the hotel to help her in with her stuff. It wasn't Donna's responsibility, and yet so I said no, and I'm like, no, go, you know. I thought better of it very quickly, and I said, no, go and help. And she did. She went and she helped the woman come in, and sure enough, her husband's in a wheelchair, so she had to bring him in, and then she had to move and park her car somewhere. But, you know, there are two responses to a situation. The curt and dry, no, I'm not doing anything about this. It's not my problem. You handle it, right? Which we've all seen and experienced and perhaps have been ourselves. And then there's the other experience where someone goes out of their way to try to make arrangements and to help that person, you know, make do and make easier their burden of taking care of someone who's handicapped, plus have baggage to come in. And so, you know, I said to Donna yesterday, because it was really sort of bothering me, and I said to Donna, look, I know I said no and then I said yes, but the no was really more of an angry reaction to how I felt about the person behind the hotel, because they could have easily said it any other way and they would have understood, but the curtness of it was just so dismissive. And I think for us, we're very often like that without really recognizing or realizing the situation. Here's a time where this girl could have walked backwards against what, even if she was trained to say, no, you can't leave your post or whatever it is, you can't leave your cashier or whatever. Even if that was the case, there's a million different ways she could have said this that would have been more acceptable to not just the woman, but to me, because I found that I got very angry and irate about it because of what it was, and Donna for sure did absolutely the right thing in going to lend a hand. But here's a situation that's really very simple for us, and yet at the same time, there's two different responses. And you and I have seen them time and time and time again. The one thing I wanted to talk about and why I asked Tom to do the reading from Isaiah is because I think in all of our busyness and all of our activity, I think we often forget that God waits for us. God waits for us to drink in his presence. And so if you heard Tom's words, he was talking from the prophet Isaiah. Isaiah is saying that God is saying he is the source of all water. He is the source of everything that makes us thirsty, and that we should be drawn to him, and that when we're drawn to God, then we are satisfied. If you watch anything on social media now, you'll find that there's a lot of opinions going around, a lot, on everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be something as simple as, you know, the best wine. It could be something about food. It could be something about anything, and people will argue and debate. If you look into the world of Christianity, you will find 99.5% of the time, people are arguing about Scripture. Everyone has an opinion about how something needs to be interpreted. Everyone does. Everyone has a different opinion. Even scholars, people who teach in universities, have different opinions about the very same texts. And it takes an enormous amount of time to vent their position and to argue why their position is better than someone else's. And I guess there is a place for that, and I think there's a value to some of that repertoire and conversation to better understand what the scriptures say. And then you'll find those significant amount of social media posts that are really very busy at putting down certain segments and certain traditions. So the Presbyterians don't like the Catholics don't like the Orthodox don't like. And so there is a huge, huge swath of people who have different opinions about why their tradition is better than everyone else's, and the other people are all wrong. And if you're with them, then you're not with us, type thing, right? And then of course we move into the sinfulness of homosexuality and drunkenness and all this stuff, and you will if you're not careful, you will get hit in the head with scripture quotes as they are flying from one opinion to another in every situation, trying to minimize and ostracize different people and different groups, when in the midst of all of that, in the midst of all the interpretation and all the arguments, the one thing all of us have in common is this person of Jesus. The one thing we all have in common is his teachings. We have his example. We have his words. We have how he has acted that have been recollected by the best situation ever. So let's say, for an instance, and this will get me in trouble this week, let's say, for an instance, you and I are no longer allowed to read anything in Scripture. Nothing. Nothing at all. You're not allowed to pick up a Bible. We're not allowed to use it at church. Nothing. Okay? You're never able to touch a Bible again. Would that change what you know about the essence, the core of Jesus' teaching? No. Right? Love of God, love of neighbor. I mean, this has been hounding us, since we were kids. When we would come to church, we would hear this over and over again. So even if you take away all Scripture, which would take away all argument, and if you take away all traditions, you would still end up with this person of Jesus and the centrality of his message and what it is that he was trying to explain in his time, that for 2,000 years we are still trying to reflect upon and capture. What does it mean that God is in this person of Jesus, and that this person of Jesus acts, thinks, and talks a certain way? Even if we had no more traditions and we had no more Scripture, we would still have the person of Jesus. The one thing I do not find in social media, the one thing that nobody is comfortable to talk about, the one thing that we're afraid to put ourselves out there on because we probably don't do it well ourselves, is trying to live the example of Jesus Christ. Trying to live the example that he left us. See, I believe we get caught up in traditions and we get caught up in Scripture because we know that the one thing we lack the most is the ability and the witness of saying that we are trying to live as Jesus lived. We're trying to have his heart. We're trying to have the heart of God in how we see ourselves and in how we see one another. And so you'll never hear that on social media. Find it for me. Send it to me. It's not there. People don't challenge us. No one steps up and says, our responsibility isn't about the traditions. It's also not about the Scripture. It's about the person of Jesus and what he means and how if we say we are disciples of Jesus, a disciple means that we are doing something that has been taught us by the Master. Our lives should reflect the activity, the thoughts of Jesus. And so for many of us, we all declare ourselves Christians, but at the same time, I'm not sure our lives mimic that of Jesus Christ. And maybe it's a good idea that tradition should fall away. Maybe it's a good idea that Scripture should be stripped out of our hands. Because all we've done with the traditions and all we've done with Scripture is hurt one another. We've just abused one another. And we've done that because we're uncomfortable with this central reality that we are not very good witnesses to the love that Jesus Christ displayed in his life. We're not. I'm not. I struggle every single time. I told you this story. I don't know how many pastors get up here and talk about all the mistakes they made. The reason I like talking about the mistakes is that you'll understand that in the course of trying to follow Jesus, you're going to make mistakes. But try, we must. Try to be the heart of God, we must. That is something that is left to us. But yet, we're not comfortable walking backwards in a world that is rushing forward. Because even when we start to walk backwards, we think that we're missing something because we're not going in the same direction as everybody else. And yet Jesus and his disciples were all about walking backwards. The whole first 200-300 years of experiencing Jesus had none of the history, had none of the institutions, had none of the Scripture as we understand it. Pieces of it, for sure. Please don't send me a text. I understand. There were writings and people talking about it. I get it. But I'm saying that they didn't have all the formality that we have now. And even with all the formality, has it made our hearts larger to engulf and encompass one another? Has it made our hearts strong enough to walk backwards in society, trying to live and trying to move by a different tune, a different set of values? And I think if we're honest, we have to say that most of the time we get caught up with church, how many people are in church, how many people are watching, what's our videos look like, all of that, right? And what was the one thing that I shared with all of you this week? When everything seemed in this place that things were having some difficulties and some challenges, right? We all moved very quickly to try to do what we had to do or thought we had to do. And then in the end, God comes through. And God does exactly what it is that God has always done with this place. God has always made a way for Eastchester Church and Lincoln Academy. Always. In spite of our best efforts, God has always made this possible. And yet, even with a witness such as this, you and I struggle to be responsive to the faithful love that God has for us. We don't take the time to sit and to allow the presence of God and that wellspring of water to flush over our souls and give us refreshment. Look on social media. There's so much about how to take care of the body, right? There's all these exercises you could do. I get exhausted just watching the people do their exercises. I watch them do exercises and I lay down because it's just tired. It makes me tired. There's so much about mental health, right, and self-help, right? We listen to these things. We hear all the quotes from, prophets and like Buddha and people like that, and you hear and read all this stuff, but you never see anywhere in there about spiritually resting. You never see anywhere in there about just resting in God, not being caught up with everything, and just resting in God. And it makes me think that the man who walked backwards today, on that path, on that track. He rested at night, and he got up, and I hope he walked face forward over the bridge. And then when he came down on the other side, he put himself into motion, but he had rested first early in the morning. I think for you and I to be more Christ-like, perhaps what is missing from us is not the desire, but the fact that we have not rested enough in the Father's love to empower us to go forth and to look with new eyes and see those who are handicapped, to see those who need help, to go out of our way to walk backwards and face a society and say, my values will be that of Jesus Christ. My values, every day, I will attempt to go farther walking backwards than any other time. I will attempt to do the entire track of my life, walking backwards, trying to be a person of love, compassion, and tenderness. God bless you.